Most break-in stories start with loud noises, sudden chaos, or unexpected disturbances. But the story that changed my life didn't start with chaos. It started with silence, a power outage, a dark hallway, and the quiet realization that someone else seemed to be inside my home, long before I understood what they wanted. My father had gone on a business trip, leaving me alone in the house for a few nights. Nothing unusual, we both traveled for work, and it wasn't the first time I'd stayed home by myself. I planned on having a calm night in, a movie, some snacks, and then sleep. The kind of night you don't even remember a week later, except this one I will never forget. I was halfway through a movie, some light romantic drama I'd put on to distract myself from the creaking noises an old house makes, when the entire place went dark. The TV clicked off, the air settled into a heavy stillness, and the hum of appliances disappeared all at once. At first I didn't react. This was South Africa. Power cuts weren't exactly breaking news. Still, something about the timing felt odd. I grabbed my phone from my room and called a friend who lived just a few streets away. Their lights were still on, fully powered, nothing unusual going on. I stood there in the dark hallway, my screen glowing against the blackness, and felt a subtle, creeping discomfort. My house was the only one without power. But I tried not to overthink it. I didn't want to call my father. He was probably in the middle of meetings and didn't need the extra stress. So instead, I kept myself entertained on my phone for a while, scrolling, texting, listening to a few podcast episodes until my battery dropped lower than I liked. By then, I was tired. A little uneasy, maybe, but mostly tired. I decided to go to bed. That's when I saw it. I stepped into my bedroom, and just as my eyes adjusted to the dim outline of the room, I noticed movement, something shifting in the space between my half-open door and the hallway beyond. It was the outline of someone's shape. Someone was standing just outside my door, leaning slightly in, their head angled into my room as if watching me through the narrow opening. At first, I froze. I didn't gasp, didn't scream, didn't move. Something instinctual held me perfectly still. My mind raced, searching for any explanation that wasn't the obvious one. But nothing made sense. The figure didn't flinch when I looked at them. They didn't react at all. They stood completely still, as if waiting, as if evaluating. I couldn't make out details in the darkness, just the unmistakable outline of a tall shape, shoulders lifted, posture unnervingly calm. I kept my breathing steady, forcing myself not to react, not to show that I'd seen them. It felt like we stood there forever, separated only by a sliver of open doorway and pure, suffocating tension. Then I heard the faintest sound. Slow, steady movement approaching. Not hurried, not clumsy, deliberate. My heart thundered in my chest, but I kept still. Kept quiet. Kept pretending I was unaware. I don't remember exactly when my mind slipped into a haze or when consciousness faded, but everything after that moment is blank, like someone pressed a reset button in my memory. The next thing I recall is waking up, not in my bedroom. Not even on the same floor. I was lying somewhere unfamiliar, the space colder than the house should have been. I sat up quickly, disoriented, throat dry, pulse unsteady. Darkness surrounded me, but not the kind from a power outage. This darkness felt enclosed, heavier, like the walls absorbed the light before it could settle. "Hello?" My voice cracked. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one. Oh, awake sooner than expected. The voice came from somewhere behind me, calm, amused, disturbingly cheerful. The sound alone sent a cold rush down my spine. I turned slowly, and though I couldn't see the speaker clearly, I recognized the tone instantly. The silhouette from my doorway. That realization alone made my breath catch. "Where am I? Who are you?" My voice trembled, despite my attempts to stay steady. "That doesn't matter," the voice said lightly, as if discussing weather. "You're here now. That's what matters." There was no anger, no urgency, no obvious motive. Just a casual, unbothered voice talking to me like I'd walked into the wrong room at a dinner party. I forced myself to stay calm. I reminded myself of one thing I hadn't lost: my phone. I had slipped it into my pocket earlier when the power went out. My father, always overly cautious, had made me keep emergency numbers on speed dial. At the time, I'd rolled my eyes at the paranoia. Right then, I was grateful for it. I kept my movements minimal, fingers trembling inside my pocket as I felt for the phone, pressed the shortcut, and hoped the call would go through despite the darkness underground. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Fast. Close. Before I could react, someone snatched the phone from my hand. "What do you think you're doing?" The voice snapped. Not angry, but incredulous, as though I'd broken some unspoken rule. "You really shouldn't complicate things." My stomach twisted, but I held my ground. "I want to go home." A moment of quiet followed. The air felt tense, like the darkness itself grew thicker. I could sense the person nearby, watching, calculating. Then something changed. The atmosphere changed. The silence stretched too long, and I realized something important. Whoever they were, whatever they wanted, they hadn't expected me to have contacted anyone. The police would trace the call. They would come. The next stretch of time is hard to recount, not because of anything physical, there was none of that, but because of the oppressive dread, the airless fear, the sense of being trapped somewhere below my own home, not knowing what was coming next. Minutes felt like hours. At some point, distant noises cut through the silence, voices calling out, muffled echoes coming through walls and floors I couldn't see. Light swept across the room. A door opened. Hands reached for me, guiding me into fresh air. I remember blinking at the brightness, shaking from fear and relief. Officers asked questions. Neighbors had gathered outside. The strange, disorienting nightmare was suddenly over. Later, I learned the truth. The man had entered my house through a side door I didn't realize hadn't fully latched. He'd been entering unoccupied homes on our block for years, sneaking in when the power went out, waiting silently in hallways until residents fell asleep or left. But no one had ever encountered him directly, until me. He had no clear motive, no pattern, no purpose that anyone could determine, which somehow made it worse. He was simply there, in people's homes, watching. Even now, long after the locks were replaced, long after the house was checked and secured, I still struggled to sleep. Because I didn't just fear him, I feared the idea of him. The idea that someone could stand in your doorway, silent and patient, waiting for you to notice, or praying that you don't. Some people say the idea of a boogeyman isn't real. I wish I could believe that, but I've seen his shadow. He knew things about me that he shouldn't have known. You always think you know the person you married, until the night something terrifying happens. Or in my case, the night something seemed terrifying. And they show you exactly who they are. People always talk about home invasions like it's the strangers you should fear. But I'm here to tell you, the real horror is realizing the person beside you would leave you, or someone you love, behind without hesitation. I'm 34 years, father of none, caretaker of one, my elderly aunt, and until recently, husband to my beautiful wife. We'd been married for years, but those last few months felt like we were living in a house filled with invisible cracks. Every conversation turned into an argument, every silence stretched a little too long, and every day I felt a little more like a roommate than a partner. But nothing prepared me for the day everything truly snapped. It was a Wednesday, middle of the work week, nothing special about it. I was at work, the kind of day where the clock moves slower than usual. At home, my wife was supposed to be watching my aunt, who was recovering from a health scare. She could move around, but not fast, and she needed someone nearby in case she lost her balance or needed help. My wife agreed to watch her. She promised she would. Around noon, I got a text from my wife telling me to call her. I stepped outside the office to ring her back, figuring it was something simple. I could barely understand her. She was out of breath, crying, panicked. I finally made out some words. There was someone at the door. I panicked and ran. I ran out of the house. There was someone trying to get in, she said in a high-pitched tone. My first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. You ran? Where are you now? Is my aunt okay? Silence. She didn't answer the second question, just kept repeating how terrified she was, how she rushed out the back door, how she left everything behind. Everything, unintentionally leaving my aunt behind. By the time I got the full story, police were already at the house. Someone in the neighborhood had called for her. The officers swept the entire house and found a repair guy, a man who was supposed to go to the neighbor's place. He'd been told the door would be open. Wrong driveway, wrong door, wrong timing. And that's all. When I got home later that day, the house felt wrong, thick with something heavy. My aunt was sitting on the couch, still shaken. She told me she heard the front door, heard footsteps leaving, then silence. She had no idea why the person watching her had suddenly disappeared without a word. She asked me, confused. Did something happen? Why did she run out so fast? I didn't know how to answer. That night I finally sat down with my wife. I expected fear, maybe embarrassment, maybe regret for leaving a vulnerable person alone during what she thought was an emergency. But instead, she wanted sympathy. She wanted comforting. She wanted me to reassure her. She told me it was the most traumatic moment of her life, that she did what anyone would do, that I needed to stop being cold about it. I asked her the only question that kept replaying in my head. Why didn't you check on my aunt before you left the house? She stared at me like I had offended her. I didn't have time to think. I had to get out. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. But something inside me stirred. Because here's the truth I couldn't ignore. If this had been real, if something had happened, she wouldn't have called for my aunt, tried to lead her out, grabbed a phone, shouted for help. Nothing. She would have put herself first, without hesitation, without looking back. And if the roles were reversed, if I had left her elderly relative alone during a scare, she would have never forgiven me. She might have divorced me on the spot. The days that followed made everything clearer. Instead of reflecting, she doubled down. Instead of acknowledging what happened, she acted like I was the problem. Instead of calming down, something in her behavior got worse. She avoided talking about the incident unless it was about how traumatized she was. She started staying out late with friends. She criticized me for being emotionally distant, even though I was doing double the chores, double the caregiving, double the effort. But the worst part, I couldn't shake the image of her sprinting out the back door while my aunt sat quietly in the next room, unaware of anything. I couldn't shake the realization that my wife, the person who lectured me endlessly about responsibility, abandoned someone fragile the moment panic hit. Not even real danger, just the fear of it. And the night I understood that, something broke for good. Not in the house, not in the neighborhood, but in me. Because the scariest part of that home invasion wasn't the stranger at the door. It was finally seeing the truth about the person I married. If you've ever wondered what real terror sounds like, It's not footsteps, or a door slamming, or someone shouting. For me, it started with a noise I still hear when I close my eyes. A sound like a dying cat, a sound that yanked me out of calm and threw me into the worst night of my entire life. On Wednesday, the 17th of June, at around 6:30 p.m., I was in my bedroom trying to wind down from another long day. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual. My routine was the same as always. Change into comfortable clothes, check on my parrots, maybe watch a bit of TV, the kind of evening where the house feels familiar and predictable. Safe. And then I heard it. A loud cry. Sharp, sudden, and full of alarm. Except it didn't even sound human at first. It sounded like a cat in distress, like something being cornered or hurt. I froze where I stood. It wasn't a noise we ever heard in our home. Not that loud. Not that desperate. My mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe it's outside. Maybe it's the neighbors. Maybe it's just some animal in the yard. But something inside me didn't buy that. There was a tension in the air, this sudden heaviness that made the hairs on my arms rise. I stepped toward my bedroom door carefully, listening again. Silence. Then the noise came a second time. Sharper, closer. And I knew instantly it was coming from inside the house. My hand was on the doorknob before I even realized I'd moved. I turned it and stepped into the hallway. I didn't get the chance to take a second step. Several men rushed me at once, fast, coordinated, and carrying threatening items. It happened so quickly, my brain lagged behind reality. One moment I was standing in the hallway, the next I had shoved a shiny object toward my face. Cold metal pressing against my skin. The kind of moment where the entire world shrinks to the sound of your own heartbeat. I didn't fight. I didn't shout. My body locked up in pure shock. They ordered me not to move. Their voices were harsh, switching between languages that I didn't recognize. The tone filled with an authority that didn't feel improvised. This wasn't chaotic. This was controlled. Another man pushed me backward and slammed me against the wall, one hand gripping my shirt tightly. Before I could say anything, before I could even breathe, I heard my mother cry out from the living room. A sound I had never heard from her before, a sound that sliced straight through me. I turned my head instinctively towards the noise, and that's when the men forced me to the floor. My cheek hit the tile. My arms were yanked behind my back. Something rough and tight dug into my wrists. Then I saw her. My mother. They were aggressively restraining her without hesitation. She was crying out, struggling, trying to shield herself. I saw her fall. I saw her hit the floor and struggle to get back up. My breath stopped in my throat. "Please," I tried to say, but something pressed harder against the side of my head. One of the men leaned down, grabbed my beard, and yanked my face up toward him. He said, staring straight into my eyes, "We know you." Something inside me snapped cold. How did he know my name? I didn't recognize his face. His eyes meant nothing to me. There was no voice I could place, no memory to match him to. But he said my name like he'd rehearsed it, like he'd been waiting to say it. That moment hit me harder than the weapons or the shouting. That moment told me this wasn't random. Someone had watched us. Someone had prepared for this. Someone had fed them information. I tried to speak, but he squeezed my beard tighter. "If you talk again," he said quietly, "you'll make things harder for yourself." The threat was calm. Not emotional. Not angry, just matter of fact. They turned their attention back to my mother and my father. My dad tried to intervene, and they restrained him quickly, pushing him back, shouting over him, forcing him down. I kept waiting for someone to help. A neighbor, a passerby, a miracle. But the house swallowed every sound. My parents were being overpowered in front of me, and all I could do was lie there and listen to my own pulse thundering in my ears. They kept shouting at us to stay quiet, to stop looking at them, to hand everything over. And I did the one thing my brain could grasp. I begged. "Take it," I said. "Take everything. Just don't hurt us anymore." One man leaned down again, lowering his face close to mine as if examining me. "You don't tell us what to do," he said. Behind him, my mother was no longer moving the way she had been before. Her breathing sounded wrong. Her face looked pale. Her body wasn't reacting properly. She was staring upward, her eyes locked open. I asked one of the men if she was alive. He glanced at her, then nudged her with his foot. "She's not unconscious," he said. "She's making noise." His tone was flat, impatient, as if she were an object in his way. Fear washed over me in waves. I could feel it tightening my chest, drying my mouth, making my limbs go numb. My hands and feet were bound so tightly I couldn't feel my fingers. Then one of the men grabbed me under the arm and dragged me down the hallway. My feet scraped across the floor. The world blurred as they pulled me into a spare bedroom and left me there, face down, unable to move. I could hear them tearing through the house, drawers opening, furniture shifting, footsteps everywhere, their leader barking orders like someone used to commanding others. Every minute felt stretched thin. I kept expecting to hear another scream, another voice, a gunshot. But then, suddenly, silence. A new kind of silence. Not peaceful, not comforting. A silence that felt like a warning. And then, finally, distant voices. Different from before. The sound of a radio. The thud of boots on the floor. A shout calling out for anyone inside. Relief rushed through me so suddenly that I almost couldn't process it. My dad managed to untie himself. He crawled to me and got my hands free. My arms tingled painfully as blood returned to them. My mother was still on the floor. She was breathing, but shallowly. Her injuries were worse than I'd realized. She's 78. She has breast cancer. She did not deserve any of this. We couldn't lift her properly. I carried her as gently as I could to the bathroom and tried to make her comfortable. Every tiny movement made her gasp. Every sound made her flinch. The paramedics came. They took her away. They wouldn't let me see her afterward because of the hospital rules during COVID. My dad managed to see her, but I had to stay behind with nothing but my thoughts and the shaking that wouldn't stop. I felt like I was watching my own body move while my mind stayed stuck in that moment. Guns in my face. My mother on the ground. Someone saying my name who should never have known it. That night passed on eerily. I kept jolting awake every time I drifted off for even a second. My entire body trembled uncontrollably. Every sound, even soft ones, made my nerves jolt. The bruises on my wrists, the marks on my ankles, the stiffness in my arms. Everything was a reminder of what happened. My parrots had been in my room the whole time. Bobby and Giggles. They didn't make a sound. Not one. I'm grateful for that, because if the men had heard them, I don't know what they would have done. The thought makes me sick. We found out later that the attackers had planned everything. They knew our routine. They watched our house. They climbed over the neighbor's wall and entered through my mother's window. They took wallets, phones, laptops, jewelry, cash. Anything they could carry. But those things don't matter to me. They can be replaced. My mother can't. She was still seriously ill, and I can't do anything except to wait and pray. Since that night, I've spoken to a trauma counselor. It helps a little, but the nightmares remain. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men storming into the hallway. I see my mother on the floor. I hear someone speaking my name in a voice I don't recognize. My world feels smaller, colder, less safe. I miss my mother more than I can describe. I miss the house before that night. I miss the feeling of being able to breathe without trembling. And if you're watching this, please check your windows and your doors. Don't assume your routine is invisible. Don't assume a quiet neighborhood means you're safe, because we thought so too. and everything changed in less than a minute.